Yes.
Okay. The board met tonight in executive session. We're now ready to begin the public portion of our meeting. We have had some written communications since September 27th, which was our last meeting, and I will go over them roughly in date order. We had a communication from Amanda McCabe, which praised the equity audit. Communication from Mrs. Sawa with regard to the calculator, to miscommunication or misinformation about the need for specific calculators for the Start Strong test. And I know that Mr. Phillips worked with Mr. Lawler on this, this communications issue. Do you want to add anything to that? No. Okay. We had an email from Sarah Scarlett. Thanks for the equity audit. She asked about the publication from Carol Florzak, who is the president of the Home and School at Central. With regard to the graffiti incident in town, sent out an email, as did Mr. Phillips. We had a communication from Debbie Mance, who is on the town council, thanking us for working to eliminate meeting conflicts with the council. We had an email from Susie Carter, who believed that our parent letter on graffiti should have been more specific after the police chief's response and before the mayor and council's response, followed the guidelines of the police chief's response, which was less specific in order to not provide additional attention for the perpetrator of the act. Certainly it was not to detract from the seriousness of that act. We had an email from Maggie Reed with questions on specific social studies tests that, that her son did something called the American Nation, which was in use in 2013. That is no longer in use. She also questioned what we were doing to diversify our curriculum and generally work on DEI, and she received a reply, and as we saw last week in the equity audit, this is something that is ongoing in the district. And then we had an email from Tiffany Ludwig also in support of the equity audit, and that was the public communication. And the president's report. I wanted to recognize Duke Mendez, who is our longest serving staff member, who is retiring at the end of the year. He has in Glen Ridge, and he has served long and well, deserves a wonderful retirement. We will have much more to say about him as his retirement draws nearer and on the retirement, but it is a bittersweet thing when a long-serving employee retires. Also, there is a bill on the governor's desk that aims to help relieve the school nurse shortage, which has been much in the press of late. It would allow retired school nurses to come back into service for up to 2 years without pension penalties. So it's just awaiting a signature. It may provide some help because school nurses everywhere are certainly on the front lines of our battle against COVID. And let's see, the school boards, the National School Boards Association, which is the national association with which the New Jersey School Boards Association is connected, has asked the U.S. Department of Justice to help with investigation of threats against school leaders, including school administrators and school board members. This is not something we've encountered, thankfully, here in Glen Ridge, but it is something that is ongoing in New Jersey and elsewhere, and the FBI is going to work with local leaders in places where threats have been made to try to get to the bottom of those threats and put a stop to them. So this is something that is also ongoing. U.S. DOJ is forming a task force on this as well. And that is the President's report. Mr. Phillips.
Thank you. I first want to recognize Duke Mendez also. Duke started with Glen Ridge in September of 1985, and as a teacher, a health teacher, and our driver's education teacher. So he serves a lot of multiple roles during the day. He was a long-term football coach for Glen Ridge. He has formed many positive relationships with the students, and I know there's a number of students that he remains in touch with. I want to wish him the best this year as he finishes out his last year in Glen Ridge. He's had a tremendous impact on the school, and he will be missed. And I'm going to get to my presentation. I'm going to stand up so I can make sure I'm on the right page. So I want to start off by going through some of our COVID numbers as we looked at the last 2 weeks. We do have 2 schools that had a high number of quarantines, and that's related to a number of individuals who tested positive for COVID. So we have 2 schools that have been hit. This Forest Avenue had 3 schools that had to be, 3 classrooms that had to be quarantined, and hence you get the 75 total for there. Overall, we've seen a drastic decrease in cases at the high school, and I think that can be attributed to the number of staff and students who are vaccinated in this building. So adjustments to our safety protocols. And you can see what is happening with the town as far as cases within Glen Ridge. On a side note, we did sign up for the state program to have on-site COVID testing happening, and I am meeting with the vendor that's been assigned to Glen Ridge, looking at testing our staff who are unvaccinated as part of the governor's executive order, but we're also looking at the possibility of testing students if the parent chooses that option. The last thing I just want to remind parents to please continue to do wellness checks. Every time we have a case, it's difficult to deal with the case, but tends to lead to about 5 to 10 other students that need to be quarantined. So in order to maintain a healthy environment, it starts at home. If your child meets the criteria of that they need to be excluded from school, please keep them home. Call the nurse up and talk through that process with the nurse. By keeping your child home, you're helping other students who might have to quarantine if they did come to school. I want to talk about a few of our district initiatives. Today, the staff did have a professional development day. The morning portion of that day was dedicated to diversity, equity, and inclusion topics, and we were very fortunate to have Dr. Lily Edwards speak to our entire staff, first of all, and she gave an overview of DEI to our staff and talked a little bit about the history, so everyone had a greater understanding of where it's coming from. After the district overview, we broke it out into 2 groups, and she first met with the pre-K through 6 teachers and talked about how to implement and include DEI into the curriculum. And then after that meeting, she met with the 7 through 12 teachers. So it was a productive morning. The teachers in the afternoon also had time to meet and discuss how they, what they got out of that presentation and how they can move forward in implementing. It's one of our first professional developments for the staff this year, but there'll be more to follow. In the afternoon, there was a variety of training based on the needs of the staff, from direct training to verbal de-escalation, teaching students with autism, and there's department and grade level meetings in addition to the other meetings. You know, we are limited by the number of professional development days we have in districts, so when we have these days, we really like to take advantage of them, and I thought today was an extremely productive day, so I want to thank our professional development committee for making that possible. We have started our strategic planning process. We first met last week with the committee. There's our facilitators, the Madison Institute, recommend we have about 25 members for our core group. We have 27 members that include administrators, staff members, board members, representation from parents from various groups, and a couple community members, core team. On the meeting on October 6th, it really started laying the groundwork of working as a team and what that's going to entail throughout this process. We started looking at shared values And at the end of the meeting, we started beginning work towards a mission statement. I have a follow-up meeting with the Madison Institute this week, and we'll establish a time for our next group meeting. Surveys were sent out to the school community, and I will be sending out a second notice just to make sure we're getting feedback from parents, staff, students, and community members. And this summer, with the review of IEPs, this month is going to be a very busy month for the auditors. They are meeting with parents, child site team members, principals, Board of Education members, and they're going to start going into the classroom and do some observations. So they're trying to be as thorough as possible when they're looking at our special education program. What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? Are we following all the mandated guidelines of going through the IEP process? What are areas that we could improve on when we're looking at providing instruction to our students? So it's been I've been very pleased so far with my communication and the feedback I'm getting from events. We're starting to see a little bit more normal activity happening. I know this past weekend the high school had homecoming, so they had hosted a home football game, and they had a homecoming dance, which is something that didn't happen last year. The dance was held in the backfield of the high school, so I'm glad that we're again seeing events happening in the district. Parent-teacher conference is happening this week at the high school, and middle school activity night on Friday. And next week is School Violence Awareness Week. There'll be a college teacher conferences. So we continue to, as we're looking at the pandemic numbers that in the last couple of weeks they've improved, and we've heard some positive news about vaccination coming out for 5 to 11-year-olds, which will hopefully improve the situation in our schools.
The first public comment period for comments on agenda items only. For those of you who are new in this session, there is a 2-minute time limit, which I will time using the stopwatch function on my watch, and any affiliation that you might have. And if you have several comments or questions, please ask them all at once so that we can then answer them hopefully in the Any public comment? Okay, I'll leave my clock. It is the first meeting of the month when we do committee and liaison reports, and hopefully all of you are prepared. Michael, would you start?
Sure. The curriculum committee met. We had an update on this year's curriculum review, which is mathematics. We talked about today's professional assessment test, the Start Strong testing, which apparently went very well in the high school and is, I think, starting in Ridgewood Avenue School tomorrow. I think that was the primary.
Curriculum committee report.
Is the math update for all grades?
Yes, it's a review.
Okay, Jocelyn?
Sure. So just as Dirk mentioned in his overview, one of the events this week is the GRACE meeting. So that is the Glen Association for Special Education. That meeting will be at 7:30, and a link will be sent out to all parents beforehand if you want to join. And that is really a parent-to-parent meeting, or an opportunity for parents to speak to one another about special education in Glen Ridge if their child is in the Forest Avenue Home and School Association meeting this week. There was an overview of the safety protocols that have been adopted because of the incidents of COVID infections in the school, and how they are now mapping students during. There was also a lot of discussion of all of the events going on at the school, like on the 14th, there's a parents' night. Consideration of how future events are going to take place and whether or not TREPS will take place, which is a marker.
Any questions on that report? Okay, Heather?
Yeah.
I just had an update from the gas lamp players.
October 23rd, so keep that on your calendars. bring your car over. I've also been contacted by former and current commissioners of volleyball and basketball. Volleyball commissioners wanted to take advantage of the fact that the floor in Ridgewood's getting redone and to see if they can include cleats for volleyball nets in that reconstruction.
We're coordinating that out right now, actually. So we did go visit a couple floors, different options, so as opposed to the wood floors, and I have been in touch with the GRA commissioner, and I did inform him that we are coordinating out the possibility of including that.
Excellent. Okay. And I was also approached by some of, actually the former basketball commissioner about gym access for basketball this winter. They didn't know what the status was, so I figured I'd check into that.
So at this time, we're telling the GRA winter activities that we're initially scheduling, but we're going to be monitoring their situation, and as we get closer to those dates, their startup dates, we're letting them know.
Okay.
But we are reserving space.
Would you like me to report back, or you
I've actually spoken to the GRA commissioner, so he's aware of it.
Great. Thank you.
Any questions on Anthony's report? Okay, Tracy.
Okay, the GREF, the Educational Foundation, is again pushing forward with their mini grant approval and streamlining it to make it easier for teachers again this year, given the circumstances. And as we all know, they were very generous last year. The Ashenfelter 8K and the Fleming 1 Mile, which is one of the borough's largest events, will be returning for Thanksgiving Day with COVID protocols in place. They are, of course, focused on eliminating indoor crowding through any means. They're, at this point, looking for family sponsorships and corporate sponsorships, and shirts and bibs will be delivered to Glen Ridge addresses at no additional cost, and that should alleviate some of the crowding. Their website is up, and it should be being distributed through the school email and social media. It can be found by Googling A8K. Central School has not met. They changed their meeting to tomorrow night, but I have a lovely update from Carol. Their first ever Fall Fest took place on Harrell Field on Sunday, October 3rd. They had inflatables, sack races, cornhole, face painting, tattoos, and music. School photos were taken on October 4th. They had a book fair, which took place on the 5th and the 6th. Their sales goals were met. And as a result, Central will receive $1,000 in scholastic bucks to help support the needs of the library and STEM at school. Some additional fundraisers will be coming up this fall starting next week, which include an online spirit wear sale and a Charleston Wrap fundraiser. Food days will be kicking off on Friday the 8th with pizza and applesauce available for students, and if that goes well, Mondays will be added sometime in November. They too are participating in the costume drive that the other schools are contributing to, and their planning is underway for their pumpkin walk, which will be happening later in the month. The Personnel and Policy Committee met on September 30th. We discussed several staffing concerns and several policies, including the district's policy on cell phone usage. We also approved salary guidelines for the district's confidential employees. And that's it for me.
Okay, any questions on that?
Tracy, could you just expound a little bit about what the discussion of cell phone use was?
Yes,
the district
so
level?
we examined and discussed cell phone usage throughout the district. And as Mr. Phillips explained, it's really not an issue at the lower grades because most of the students are too young to have devices. At Ridgewood, the policy is that students are not to be using their devices during the day. At the high school, It is up to the discretion of the individual teachers to enforce that in their classrooms. And as far as Ridgewood and the high school are concerned, those policies can be found in their handbooks. So he went over how those policies worked with the group, and we sort of agreed that those were policies that seemed to be working.
Well, I think we've talked about kind of ways that we could help improve, though, the cell phone, the use of cell phones less by the kids. I think it's a little bit of an ongoing discussion.
It has been an
very-
ongoing
It's
discussion.
it's a complicated issue, right? I think everyone is very concerned about social media. We're all hearing what's happening with Facebook, and cell phones in the classroom is one way in which they can kind of get to that. So while it's a difficult issue to control, I think, we continue a dialogue, and if there are information that people learn and they feel this might be helpful, there are a lot of balancing considerations, right, in terms of wanting the kids to have access, but also limiting the access because, they want to focus on their education.
And for those of us those parents who don't know, I believe it's the 7th graders. They have a social media course, and I can't remember what it's called.
Social media.
Is it called? Okay. But it's a very good class, and all the students rotate through this class, and they are given really, it's a little bit of scare tactics. I mean, when you sit in a back-to-school night, the parents are very pleased to hear that the students are kind of given the real facts about social media usage. But let's face it, this is a discussion that parents, teachers, administrators, we have to have these discussions ongoing with our kids because they're kids. So, it can't stop here, and it can't stop with one 7th grade course. So I think Teresa's right. This is something that we're all aware of as a community and as a board, but regulating the usage has to be sort of left up to the individual teachers to monitor in their own classes. So.
Dirk, do they talk about social media in the upper levels? Because I remember that course with the 7th grade. I know there are some organizations that also talk about that. Is this area addressed?
So you might, they will run across it in their health classes a lot of times, not necessarily their sophomore year. When they're dealing with driver's ed, they would just go over the legalities of
Texting while
the phone
driving, yeah.
and driving and so forth. But it's part of discussions when we talk about social emotional learning, and that's happening in the health classes. One of the things that I've been talking to Mr. Lawler about is a program he ran in his old school district where he had a no tech day,
Yeah.
and just to bring a greater awareness to the students. So we're looking at creating some programs to address some awareness issues and to promote more positive use.
The High School Homeschool Association has met. Some of this information is a little bit dated, but Mr. Lawler talked about the Start Strong test, which of course has taken place, and emphasized that while it is the first sort of standardized data gathering that we've used in quite a while since COVID, it is only one data point with reference to student performance, and that it's important to remember that. He did a roundup of the various activities. They had a Ridger Day at Harrell, which is in place of a conventional pep rally. They also had they're working with the student council to reboot the homecoming dance. The middle school had a club fair on the 7th of October, which is sort of like the Glen Ridge High School club fair, only specific to the middle school. The guidance counselors are doing check-ins with students, and especially with those students who were virtual only last year. They now have the GRHS Ridgers Instagram efforts to find new ways of celebrating student voice and student accomplishments. Mr. Lawler welcomed Kim O'Donnell, the new assistant principal, and Nurse O'Connor went over the latest COVID protocols, which I know that you've all seen because in the numerous emails that have gone out about COVID. There was one question about the possibility of virtual a child who is home with a head cold, and that option is not available. There are many reasons why. The sort of drop-in, drop-out option for virtual and in-person education is very difficult, is not conducive to student excellence, and is very difficult to organize.
Page, even though there's all this craziness about Facebook right now, is super helpful because it lists things that are going on. And one of the things that I didn't realize they were doing was they're listing when colleges are visiting. So it gives, if the kids are going to actually go on to the Ridgewood, if we can get them to do it, it's helpful. But it also gives parents reminders because we would never get that information. And that if there was the kids a reminder, everybody's trying to keep track of a lot of things. So I just wanted to compliment the school on having that program. And the PSAT, I think, is this week. Is it this week?
Thank you. Any other?
It's PSAT is Wednesday. The sophomores and juniors will be taking it.
Okay, David.
I wasn't at the last meeting, but I assume someone reported out on the Finance and Facilities meeting of September 21st?
Did we?
Don't know.
I-
Well, we met on September 21st and didn't talk a lot about finance, but did talk a lot about facilities. It was on the heels of the most recent storm, so a lot of the focus was on the cleanup of that. I had a nice tour of the Ridgewood Avenue School lower gym, which is was a victim of the storm. A lot of facility stuff going on, sound dampeners, AC, roofs, and the like. It's the end of the referendum, so it was a good and reported out on at the last meeting that I was at. So that's all I have.
Any questions? All right, we have, now that we're finished with the committee and liaison reports, you have minutes in your packages from the meeting of September 27th, both exec session and regular session. Does anyone have any changes to those minutes? Okay, Michael, would you move the minutes?
I move M1.
May I have a second?
Second.
Second from Jocelyn, thank you. Barbara, would you call the roll?
Mr. Bonnet,
Aye.
Ms. Boyle Vellucci,
Aye.
Mr. Campbell,
Abstain.
Mr. DeLu,
Aye.
Ms. Gottlieb,
Aye.
Ms. Graham,
Aye.
Ms. St. Auburn,
Aye.
Dr. Yaros Ramos,
Aye.
Ms. Ginsburg.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, administrative items, the first reading of new and/or revised policies and regulations. David, would you move the administrative items?
I move A1.
May I have a second? Comments on these administrative items before we take the vote?
Betsy, I just want to clarify for the public, because one of the policy has to deal with virtual and remote instruction. As most of you know, there's executive, remote instruction was removed as a possibility, as a parent choice. If there's emergency situation where a district has to be closed, or a declared health emergency, then districts can go remote, but those conditions have to be in place in order for that to happen.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on that? Okay, Barbara, would you call the roll?
Mr. Bonnet,
Aye.
Ms. Boyle Vellucci,
Aye.
Mr. Campbell,
Aye.
Mr. DeLu,
Aye.
Ms. Gottlieb,
Aye.
Ms. Graham,
Aye.
Ms. St. Motion carries.
Tracy, would you move the personnel items?
Yes, I move P1 through P12.
May I have a second?
Second.
Second from Anthony? Okay. In keeping with our rules, personnel items are discussed in executive session. So does anyone have any reason why we should not vote on these items right now? All right, Barbara?
Mr. Bonnet,
Aye.
Ms. Boyle Vellucci, Mr. Campbell,
Aye.
Mr. DeLu,
Aye.
Ms. Gottlieb,
Aye.
Ms. Graham,
Aye.
Ms. St. Auburn,
Aye.
Dr. Yaros Ramos, Ms. Ginsburg.
Business items, and I'd like to draw your attention to the items listed under B6 of the Heroes and Cool Kits training, program training, which has a value of $5,000. A donation from Lisbeth Ellersick, who is on our faculty, of Chromebook chargers for $80,000. I'm sorry, not $80,000, $80. I just elevated Ms. Ellersick to the ranks of the very wealthy. $80, I'm sorry. Dollars to Raz, $150 to Forrest, and $150 to Linden. So we thank all of those generous donors, and especially Ms. Ellersick, whom I have just enriched greatly. With that, the motion has been made. I'm sorry. May I have a motion for the business items?
I move B1 through B10.
Thank you, David. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Duval. Okay, any questions or comments on the business items?
I just think that the Heroes and Cool Kids program is terrific, and I just wanted to thank them again, because I think it's so wonderful when the kids.
Or comments? All right, Barbara, would you call the roll?
Mr. Bonnet,
Aye.
Ms. Blaib,
Aye.
Ms. Graham,
Aye.
Ms. St. Auburn,
Aye.
Dr. Yaris Ramos, Ms. Ginsburg.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, we've come to the second public comment period for comments or questions on agenda items or other items pertaining to the running of the schools. The same rules apply, 2 minutes before we give you answers. Questions or comments? Yes, come right up here. You have to speak right into the microphone, otherwise we will be it will be hard to hear you.
What steps that Mr. Phillips has taken to follow these recommendations.
Could you just, for the benefit of the YouTube streamers, Dirk, could you just sort of repeat?
Yes, the question was what steps the school's taking as part of the rec of staff on implicit bias and the hiring of staff. As far as implicit bias, we've been doing implicit bias training with our staff for a couple years now, with our equity committee and our professional development committee to provide. Today was a perfect example by having Dr. Lily Edwards discuss the lessons, and our next job as an equity committee and the professional development committee is find our next trainer for the staff. As far as diversifying the staff, that's always been a concern when we looked at our staff, and we've made an effort to improve our candidate pool. Last year, I had the entire administrative team, which is the individuals responsible for the hiring process, as far as going through the interview training from an individual, Dr. Robin Daniels, to really discuss how we can have a little bit open-minded more when we go through that hiring process. We've been working with local colleges to bring in more diverse student teachers so they have an opportunity to come in and work in the district and become a little bit. And we have been working with CJ Pride, which is an organization in Central Jersey of mostly school human resource officers. There's a few districts like ours that do not have a human resource officer that their superintendent or a designee attends. So I attend their monthly meetings, and last year our administrators participated in their job fair, and their job fair is focusing in on diverse candidates. So we had an opportunity to meet, have helped us with the hiring process. As I mentioned earlier, in the school year, we had our most diverse new staff this past year, and we're continuing to hopefully find ways to increase our candidate pool. We're starting to see throughout in candidates. There are shortages out there in a number of fields. We're able to get qualified candidates, diverse, into our candidate pool.
CJ Pride doing another job fair this spring?
They are doing another job fair this spring. We are also, well, we do have a couple of openings this fall, but we are participating in a job fair at the end of this month.
Okay. Other comments?
Hi, Greta Sawa, Hamilton Road, Glen Ridge. I wanted to comment on last week or 2 weeks ago's meeting. I found it extremely disappointing, especially as someone who has children with names of different ethnic origins, that the introduction of the National Merit Scholar semifinalist, which is an amazing honor, and we all are very, very, Phillips was pronounced shoe. It's spelled S-H-O-H, so it doesn't even look like the word shoe, and it's of Japanese origin, which is a phonetically spoken language, and I felt so badly for that student who wasn't here, and somebody whose job is mostly to public, or not mostly, but certainly a major part is to public speak, did not look into the proper pronunciation of such a high academic recognition, was very disappointing, and it was especially disappointing that it was the night that we're talking about diversity and equity and microaggressions, of which that was one. And I just think the awareness of the, and then nobody corrects him. If the board supports that kind of behavior, then shame on you. And I don't understand why this continues to happen, this type of thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we can only, since that event is in the past, we can only apologize to the National Merit Scholar and make an effort that that not happen again.
But I will apologize to the individual if that's.
Thank you. Other comments? Okay, that being the case, board members, anything else for the good of the group?
I just had one question. The survey for
Plus, it's finished by the end of the week. They'll give 2 weeks for individuals to complete it.
Any other question being the case? May I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Motion from David. May I have a second?
Second.
Second from Michael. Thank you all.